What's up, everyone? My name is Cameron, and I'm going to be doing a deck profile for Emperor Palpatine for the new Star Wars Unlimited game that has released recently. A lot of deck profiles and talk about Sabine, Boba, and Iden as the top decks, and they definitely are. But I've been trying to try some other leaders out, see what is good. Palpatine kind of immediately drew my eye. I'm a very big control player. Its abilities seemed very strong and has been very strong. Obviously, getting to the point where you can flip Palpatine out, one of the latest, or is the latest leader to come out at 8, can be scary. But if you can survive that long, you pretty much win the game. I have paired it with a green base or command base, so doubling up on green gives it a little bit more ramp and options that basically command that allow it to, I believe, function and get to 8 a little bit faster while still controlling the board for the most part. So let's get into the list. For anyone who doesn't know what Emperor Palpatine does, the action is you can tap this leader plus pay a resource of 1 and deal 1 damage to a unit and draw a card. You also have to defeat one of your friendly units. So that seems seem not great on surface because you're giving up a friendly unit. You're only dealing 1 card damage to a unit and then drawing a card. So it may seem a little weird, but it pairs really well with its leader ability, as well as kind of gives you pairs well with other cards in the deck and kind of keeps you drawing in the late game and combos well and allows you to outlast a lot of other decks. When you flip Palpatine over on 8, when deployed, take control of a damaged non-leader unit. So this is pretty good with the other effect where you can kind of ping something down for 1, maybe a big boss monster that the unit that the opponent drops down later in the game. If you can just take control of it, it really just kind of kills any momentum the opponent has and really kind of seals the deal unless you're about to die. The on attack is basically the same effect as the other one. Also being a 4/10 just makes not only you stole a unit, and even if you don't steal a huge unit, you just steal maybe a 2, 3, 4 cost, it still ends up being quite a big swing. And then being a 4/10 on top of that, just really hard to remove as well as a body. Not huge damage, but paired with what you took should be enough damage to kind of take over the board in the late game. Getting into the deck profile or the list itself. Starting off with 3 Vanguard Infantry, 1 cost that is a 1/2. When defeated, you may give an experience token to a unit. Obviously pairs very well with the Palpatine ability, kind of buffs something up that you already have, makes one of your bigger units stronger than it is, and then pings down one of their units that can be eventually set up to be taken, or you can maybe ping down an aggressive deck that has like a 1 health, something like a Greedo, or any of the other kind of aggressive units with only 1 health. Then we move into Admiral Modi. Admiral Modi is a 2 cost, a little bit more than the Vanguard Infantry. It's a 1/1, but when defeated, you may ready a villainous unit. So that pairs well with kind of some of your bigger late game creatures or units, things like Darth Vader and Devastator, and things of that nature, where you can kind of get an extra swing either to close out life, control the board more than you already have, and ping it off with Palpatine's ability, maybe on 8 where you can play a Vader if you already had an Admiral Modi down, or you summon an Admiral Modi off of Vader's ability and then ping with Palpatine to restand the Vader. Pretty good combo there. Colonel Yularen, a 2-drop that when you play a green or a command unit, including this one, you heal, which is really good against the aggressive decks in the format right now. Moving along to Seasons Shore Trooper, a 2/3 early on, which is kind of, whatever kind of unit, nothing too crazy, but if you get to 6 or more resources, if the opponent doesn't deal with this or you just happen to bring him summon him later, he does have a little bit more value, gaining +2 when you have 6 or more resources. So one of your kind of low drop units gaining more value as the game goes on, where maybe you can trade up into 4 costs and things of that nature later in the game and kind of outvalue the opponent. Then we got the last of kind of the first turn drops, Viper Probe Droid. Being a control deck, you want to kind of adapt to your opponent's strategy and be able to counter what the opponent is doing. So Viper Probe Droid, being able to look at your opponent's hand, maybe you only get information for the next 1 to 2-ish turns, but allows you to kind of maybe helps inform your decisions on what you're going to resource and what you want to keep, because you can make better informed decisions. Moving on to the 3 costs, Cell Block Guard, obviously very good. Sentinel, good way to slow things down. One of the better things to bring off of Vader, where you can use Vader to clear a body, and then if you can pull a Cell Block Guard off of that, then it can kind of stop any kind of ground unit push that the opponent is trying to do. Consortium Star Viper is a space unit that is a 3/3, and if you have initiative, this unit gains Restore 2, which this is pretty good against decks like Sabine, where they typically give up initiative to summon multiple units, attack with them, and then also use the leader ability. And then putting this in space, maybe you can dodge some of their ground units and then Restore 2. And if not, if I've had some people, Sabine players, kind of call initiative early, which just shuts down their kind of turn. Maybe they don't attack as much, or they don't use their ability just to keep me from having initiative. So it can sometimes cut the short turn short for the aggro players if that's what they decide to do to counter it, but that's also not a bad thing in those matchups. Emperor's Royal Guard, very good paired with Palpatine, 3/5 body, pretty hard to deal with. And then as long as you have an official unit, which is Admiral Modi, Colonel Yularen, or the next card I'm going to show, then you also gain Sentinel. So good way to slow down the opponent. Definitely a good sized body for a 3-drop. Pairs well with this next card, General Veers, which gives other friendly Imperial units +1/+1. And so that kind of makes Emperor's Royal Guard a 4/6 with Sentinel. Really good, once again, at slowing down any aggressive decks that will try to, that's basically all you're trying to do. Stop people from beating you in the early game. And a lot of these cards kind of do that. And then also pair well with Colonel Yularen. You can see Emperor's Royal Guard, Consortium Star Viper, Seasoned Short Trooper, and Vanguard Infantry all proc Colonel Yularen's ability, as well with Super Laser Technician, which is just the ramp card that Boba is using a lot of right now in the command Boba. When defeated, you may put this unit on into play as a resource and ready it. Very good to kind of get up into your higher powered stuff later in game, and it comes in readied, which is very nice. The only 4-drop unit that I have right now is TIE Advanced. When played, give 2 experience tokens to another friendly Imperial unit. Pretty good to, once again, buff up all these Sentinel units, or maybe the Consortium Star Viper to kind of keep it going longer than it should. It is giving 2 experience tokens is good against most decks. It does not do necessarily always well into things like Boba that have Waylay. While sometimes they only have 2, if they get it off, it kind of ruins a lot of early tempo and maybe gets rid of your Sentinel that you tried to buff up, and then TIE Advance becomes a pretty weak drop on 4, which as a 3/2 is pretty easily dealt with. So against decks that have easy ways to remove the experience tokens, maybe you swap it out for something else, but still good against a good chunk of the meta. And then the other 4 for cost is the event command. I think a lot of the legendary events are all very strong in their own way. Command, very good for what this deck is trying to accomplish. The primary one that you want to use is the third one, which is put this event into play as a resource, kind of going along with all the other ramp cards in the deck. And ways to get to 8, but it gives you another effect as well on top of that. Give 2 experience tokens to a unit. A friendly unit deals damage equal to its power to a non-unique enemy unit, or return a unit from your discard pile to your hand. All pretty good in their own ways, depending on what you're looking for. Giving 2 experience tokens to a unit, pretty good, like tie advance, good way to buff up a unit, and then also ramp or blow up something on the board if that's more important, because your opponent has maybe put down an aggressive opponent has kind of put down a strong unit that you need to deal with immediately before they snowball the game. And then return a unit from your discard pile, not really used usually, but can be good to pick up maybe something like a Cell Block Guard or an Emperor's Royal Guard up again, just to drop down another Sentinel unit again. Moving on to kind of the bigger units of the deck, and that would be the Gladiator Star Destroyer, 6-drop, 5/6, give a unit Sentinel for this phase. You can also give it itself Sentinel or something in maybe if you have a different body on the board, but just another way to add Sentinel, maybe slow down the opponent. We don't have a ton of air as well either going on in this early. So far, only Consortium Star Viper and TIE Advanced, which, as we talked about before, none of them are really like huge bodies in the air. Can be easily dealt with sometimes by some of the other air or space units. So Gladiator Star Destroyer can come in and kind of put a stop to any space push that the opponent is trying to pull off. And then moving on to kind of probably one of the best cards in the game right now, Darth Vader, 7-drop, 5/7, has ambush, and when played, search the top 10 cards of your deck for any number of villainy units with combined cost 3 or less, and play each of them for free. So this is, if you can get to 7, it's, if your opponent has been able to kind of keep a board up until this point, Darth Vader can really kind of shut that down. Having ambush to clear a body, as we talked about before, being able to search the top 10 cards of your deck really means that you're very likely to find something. The Cell Block Guard, as we talked about before, can slow down any aggressive units. Maybe you can pull down an Emperor's Royal Guard, which pairs with the Colonel Yularen if you already had that. So if you had Colonel Yularen on, maybe you put him down on turn when you have 6 resources and pair that with something like a command or a TIE Advanced. And then follow that up with a Darth Vader. That means you'll heal about 3. You'll heal 3 health from Yularen, Darth Vader, and then the Emperor's Royal Guard, which is pretty nice to once again keep yourself alive. And we have that 30 health HP base, which is already hard to take care of. And then once Darth Vader's up, once Emperor Royal Guard is up, Colonel Yularen is just going to stick up for a good while and kind of keep that healing going past that turn. And then finally in the main deck is, for units, is the 3 Devastators, 10 drops. Pretty much one of the best end game units. Sentinel, Overwhelm, and when played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of resources you control, which at that point is 10. You're basically popping anything, huge body in the sky, can stop, once again, Sentinel, any big air pushes, has Overwhelm, it's going to get its damage in. If you get to this point, you drop a Devastator, plus you activated Emperor Palpatine's ability, there's really not anything that they can do. Yes, Devastator doesn't pull up, doesn't always show up in all the matches, primarily the aggro matchups, but things when you go up against decks like Iden, which are very popular right now, which seem to have good matchups into the aggro decks, you can kind of outvalue what a lot of people are choosing as the top control deck right now at tournaments. And then we have some final events here. Overwhelming Barrage, one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion, and I think most people would agree. Give a friendly unit +2/+2 for this phase, and then it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of other units. Really good if you paired it with something like Command or a TIE Advance, where you already buffed up one of your maybe 3-cost units, and then you're just going to wipe the board and really just kind of stop anything that your opponent's trying to do. If you can activate this card and your opponent isn't set up for it, doesn't have shields or anything like that, it can kind of just almost end the game right there. And then finally, I have 2 resupply. It is just, once again, ramp, just like Command and Super Laser Technician. The only reason I have 2 of the resupply in comparison to the Command and the Super Laser Technician is that the other 2 have ways to kind of do something to the board, because against aggressive decks, yes, ramping is nice, but you don't, Super Laser Technician at least puts a body on the board and can maybe take care of something weak. And then Command, with the second ability where you can deal damage to a non-unique, you can kind of pop something on the board. So they both accelerate while doing something else. Resupply, only doing the accelerating. Still nice to have, but just have 1 less of that. And then I do have a side deck that I've been trying out, just more, a lot of it is mainly for the aggressive decks, taking out things like Devastator, which just are never going to get activated in any of the aggressive matchups, and maybe some other things. So we have Homestead Militia. While you control 6 or more resources, this unit gains Sentinel. Getting to 6 is kind of not the hardest thing to do with things like Super Laser Technician and Command, giving you another kind of Sentinel unit that you can drop down against those aggressive decks. And then also Escort Skiff. If you control another Command unit, this unit gains Ambush. So unlike Sentinel, where maybe there's things like Saboteur that can get around it, as long as you have a Command unit, Ambush allows you to kind of clear something against maybe where you're getting outvalued by some of the other units that you have at 4. And then against, I have Traitorist for against decks like blue-white, where they have a lot of lightsabers. That deck, I've seen a couple different leaders kind of use that, build up a big unit, build up a big force unit, and then it becomes hard to deal with. Traitorous, if you can steal that against any of those big buff decks, and steal their unit that they've kind of invested a couple turns into, it can kind of just swing the game and almost end it right there on the spot. And sometimes, depending on if they get shields up, like I said, Overwhelming Barrage wouldn't get through any shields, and maybe they used things that clear your board, just using Traitorous to kind of take it instead of having to find a way to destroy it or get through a shield, which this deck doesn't always have a great way to do. And then finally, I'm not entirely sure about this last card, but something that I think I have been trying out, Agent Callus, just a 2 of, has Ambush, but then when another unique unit is defeated, you may draw a card. You can only use it once a turn, but can kind of help in the mid-game against control matchups where you really want to find your Darth Vaders, your Devastators, to kind of get into your late game. Can kind of help you find those pieces, because if you don't find them, then you will lose the matchup, control matchups. It becomes a battle of the ships in the late game for between Iden and Palpatine. But right now, in terms of matchups that I've been testing so far, I believe that Sabine is roughly slightly above favored. I think that sometimes you can kind of get rushed down or by Sabine if they hit the perfect curve, or maybe you get some bad mulligans. But for the most part, this deck has enough to deal with the early pressure of Sabine, Iden. While it is a good control deck, I think Palpatine is just a bit more tailored to the late game than Iden, so you can kind of outvalue Iden in the late game. You have slightly better boss units, as well as being able to take one of theirs with Palpatine just becomes pretty hard for them to deal with. But the one deck that we do have an issue with is Boba, the deck that, yes, it is aggressive like Sabine, but the ability to kind of get even more value in the early game by restanding resources. Palpatine can generally deal with maybe one unit at a time, but Boba dropping 2 to 3 can kind of outvalue you very early and kind of just snowball in early game. And so Boba has been a bit of an issue. We're trying some of these command cards, the 3 and 4 drop, to kind of hopefully and take out some of the bigger units just to kind of restabilize in the early game. But I would say most of the time a good Boba player should probably beat you unless you high roll yourself with some of these with a really good curve or some really good trades with things like maybe they don't find their waylay and you can get a big tie advanced off, or you can use command and kind of re-find your footing in that game before they kind of blow you out. Otherwise, a lot of the other decks, that I've played against, yes, they are, I think those are the big three. Most other decks can kind of get outvalued from Palpatine because most other decks can't apply pressure quite like Sabine or Boba, and those are the two best aggro decks kind of by consensus in the early going. And since if Palpatine can kind of survive at least Sabine, most other decks get out-traded in the late game. You have Darth Vader, such a huge card. Devastator also, just kind of both those units combined along with Overwhelming Barrage just means that you can deal with so many different threats that the opponent can kind of give you. But yeah, that has been my early going with Palpatine, what I've been liking, and I hope you guys liked it. See ya.